Do you know the invisible force in your organization that, when overlooked, can have dire consequences for your change efforts and your organization? It's culture. And in this video, I'll share with you why it's important to understand your organizational culture before you launch a change initiative and how it impacts change readiness. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Dawn Marie Turner, creator of the Readiness Mindset and president of Turner Change Management. The light bulb went on. Please may we have your attention as we demonstrate the safety features of our plane. Anyone who's ever flown recognizes those words. It was the safety demonstration. I used to travel so much I could probably have recited it myself and frequently paid little attention. However, on this one trip, that safety demonstration caught my attention. I was flying 2 different airlines, and it was on the second flight that I noticed the words were almost identical. But the feeling and the response of the passengers on the second flight was completely different than it was on that first flight. And that difference was felt throughout the entire duration of the flight. What accounted for that difference was culture. I'm not going to say whether one airline's culture was better than the other, but they were different. And we as passengers could feel the difference. The difference in their culture infused every aspect of the flight. The boarding process, that initial safety message, the way service was delivered, the way passengers interacted, and even our exit off the plane. That's the power of culture. Now, you may be wondering, what does this have to do with organizational change? A lot. Culture is the essence of your organization. It transcends everything that does or doesn't happen, and it drives all of the actions you will take, you won't take. It drives decisions. It drives what and how your employees interact with each other, talk and engage with your customers and your clients. And like that airline, the perception that the customers or clients experience as they engage with your organization. All of it is driven by the culture of your organization. My good friend and colleague, Dr. Katharina Kettner, talks about culture as being like an iceberg, similar to the way I talk about change. There is a portion of your organizational culture that's above the waterline, but there's a larger and more important and invisible side of culture that you need to account for to understand how it's influencing and driving your change efforts and your organization as a whole. It's easy when thinking about culture or wanting to change your organizational culture to only focus on the aspects above the line. That's because those aspects are visible. They're concrete and easy to recognize. For example, in the airlines, it could be the uniforms, the onboarding procedures, policies, the food they serve, their posted values, the safety demonstrations, and any of the other artifacts that are visible and concrete as you, as either the customer or the employee, work in and with that organization. However, it's the invisible, the less tangible aspects of your culture that make the biggest impact on your organization and will influence your change efforts. These invisible aspects include the unwritten, often unspoken rules that guide behavior in your organization, the values and beliefs that are underlying the actions and the way people interact. And it's these often unconscious, unspoken, below the waterline aspects of culture that are influencing what you're going to see above the waterline. very similar to when you're initiating change. What you will see above the waterline, the response, the reactions to change, often is a direct result of what's happening below the waterline. On the surface, each airline looked almost identical. Their uniforms were similar, as was the in-flight service. It wasn't much different. And even the words they used. But the difference I felt in each airline determined my experience and shaped my opinion. And that was due to the invisible portion of the airline's culture. The unconscious beliefs that were held by the passengers, each other, the perceptions, and the way the employees approached their work. The staff on each airline were professional and responsive to the needs of the passengers. Yet on one airline, I felt a little bit more relaxed. It just seemed a little friendlier, and everything felt a little more casual. It was like I'd been invited to take a trip on a friend's plane. On the other airline, I was comfortable. I was relaxed, but things were more structured, and I didn't feel the same sense of casual interactions with the staff as I did in the other airline. And that's why it's so important when you're embarking on any change, especially if you're looking to change the culture of your organization, that you make the time and space to understand both the visible and the invisible elements of your culture. It's also why training people to do something different isn't enough. And I've spoken about that before in a previous video. I'll put the link in the show notes below on why training isn't enough to enable change. To enable change, you need to understand and address those underlying beliefs of your culture. You won't know and can't know what's really driving the way your organization works unless you understand that. And any changes you make, any new skills or training to do things differently, they likely won't stick. Transforming your organization's culture, it's not a quick fix, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. Edgar Sheen, professor emeritus at MIT, notes that culture is one of the most stable parts of an organization. And that's what makes changing it so challenging. It's not to say it can't be changed, but it takes thought and an understanding of both above and below the waterline. A readiness mindset can also help you avoid one of the most common mistakes of organizational transformation. The visible aspects of your organization's culture are easy to see, which makes them easier to change. So it's really not surprising that you want to focus most of your energy, time, and resources on the visible elements of your culture. I see this with rebranding. When an organization looks to transform their culture, they often start with rebranding. Now, rebranding is valuable. It's an important step, and it can be a very helpful step in a cultural transformation. But rebranding doesn't change your culture. To get real and sustainable culture change, you need to assess, understand all of those unwritten, unconscious beliefs and rules that drive the behaviors and activities. One organization I was working with, as a part of its transformation, espoused the value of teamwork and collaboration. It was written on their value list on their wall. Yet they were struggling. Despite lots of workshops, training, rebranding, and renaming the company, there was still a culture of us, the C-suite, and them, the employees. The executive team were frustrated. And when they reached out to me, they had concluded that their employees were resistant to change, and that's what they were looking for help with. Unfortunately, labeling the employees resistant to change was only exacerbating the problem. The issue wasn't that the employees or the people were resistant to change. The problem was below the surface. There was a low level of readiness. And that was because just below the surface, there lingered some unresolved resentment, some anger, and some frustration about a previous merger. There was a belief that the CEO and the executive didn't want to hear when things weren't going well or that there was conflict, and that there was a fear of being called out or identified as not a team player if you didn't immediately get on board or you questioned anything that was brought forward. It wasn't until the executive leadership acknowledged what was below the waterline and were willing to engage with their employees in the conversations needed to bring those beliefs, those perceptions to the surface, that people could truly begin to transform. It was through those conversations that the executive leaders could identify what they needed to do differently to rebuild the trust that was needed, to rebuild that sense of confidence and comfort, and engage with those employees in a way that was consistent where they wanted their organization to go. Have you had an experience with culture change? If you have, let me know in the comments section below what your experience has been. And if you decide to embark on a cultural change, send me a message. We'd be happy to help. That's it for now. I'll see you soon.